We've heard in recent days the Corruption and Crime Commission is to be given additional powers to investigate unexplained wealth, where the supposed Mr Biggs of organised crime get their money from. But the CCC continues to investigate corrupt practice wherever it finds allegations of, and local government is one such area. And over the years, it's revealed fraudulent CEOs and employees who've misused credit cards, who've spent millions without authorisation to do so, who've assigned contracts to others for personal advantage. Some were sacked, some went to jail. The Shire of Exmouth is the latest to be investigated. Its CEO was dismissed in December for, among other things, signing a $1 million aquarium contract he had no authority to, for engaging in housing subsidy fraud, for abuse of leave and for claiming benefits to which he was not entitled. And a second Shire employee was also investigated. Now, you remember this was the council which splashed $30,000 of ratepayer money on booze and made headlines here at the ABC over the building of the $32 million Ningaloo Centre, and that aquarium still not fit to put fish in because no one's quite worked out where the water should come from. I'm not being flippant here, but in some respects these stories are stories of corrupt practice, and in some case it's incompetence. And the head of the CCC, John McKechnie, is worried, though, that they represent a rising trend of mismanagement and fraud, particularly in regional local government. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Geoff.
Commissioner, tell us what the CCC investigation discovered in Exmouth.
Well, it's all in our report, and I don't intend to read the report. But what I am worried about is that Exmouth is a microcosm of greater problems all over the sector. The local government and communities department has 16 councils it assesses as high risk. All are regional councils. It has 18 councils it assesses as medium risk. 16 of those are regional council. So there is an issue. And the issue is in procurement, lacks governance, often people who are friends, and quite bluntly, incompetence, people who have not got the skills to manage budgets of many millions of dollars or oversight a CEO who may arrogantly assert power.
Okay, we'll talk about some of the specific concerns in a moment. My understanding is, beyond some of those things that I mentioned in my introduction, once the council was advised that the CCC was investigating, it actually increased the CEO's leave entitlements.
6 weeks to 8 weeks. Nice work if you can get it.
And when the Commission told the Shire President the CEO had admitted lapses of judgment, including the misuse of a credit card, Council took no immediate action.
Yes, they weren't quite as quick on that as they were to grant him an increase in his leave.
Okay.
Which they did 10 days after knowing that we were investigating.
How do you reflect on that?
Well,
what does that tell you?
It tells me that at least this council, but perhaps many others, are simply not equipped to govern effectively regional governments with millions of dollars in taxpayer or ratepayers' money.
The CEO was Bill Price. He was described as, quote, a law unto himself. He was dismissed in December, and a recommendation was made that he and Shire employee Andrew Fort face prosecution, but this is a recommendation, not a finding. That is all you can do.
That is correct. It is not any statement of guilt, whatever.
Okay. Let's look at what the CCC saw in Exmouth that it's seen elsewhere, and it seems to me that it rather echoes a recent report into the Shire of Dowran, which also focused on a CEO and revealed, quote, breathtaking ignorance of the role and responsibilities of councillors. Do you think this fraud is rife?
Well, we've had about 700 allegations in the last year or two about local government. Now, an allegation doesn't mean, of course, there is anything there, but about 54% was assessed as possibly serious misconduct, that is, fraud, corruption. A lot of them are sent back to deal with. A lot of them turn out to be baseless. But there is an undercurrent, I think. You seem to get council staff that move from one local authority to another. They sort of outstay their welcome and move on or are moved on. It is, I'm sure, hard for local authorities in the country to attract people. They have to offer high wages and so forth. But the root problem is governance. Councils are appointed to govern. They're given the powers to govern. And yet in my short time, just on 2 years, I've seen example after example where councils don't govern effectively, provide proper oversight.
My guest this morning at 20 minutes to 9 is the Commissioner of the CCC, John McKechnie, 1300 222 720. If you wish to speak to us this morning, we would very much like to hear from you. Well, let's look at some of the things that are considered the disturbing features that are proving common to local government. Procurement, a key area of risk because I have access to your ratepayer dollars and look what I can spend it on.
Precisely, and if I give you tickets to shows or pay for your holidays or your renovations for your house at cut prices, who's to know?
The governance issue, placing friendship over probity. And again, this is no fault of regional communities, but it's part of the definition of a smaller community. There are so many people in town and you know everyone who sits around the table.
It's a real issue. I mean, one doesn't expect councillors to be at war with their CEO, but they have to recognise that friendship is one thing, but when you're elected to a position, ignorance is no longer an excuse, whether you're elected on a single issue or not. You are responsible for the governance of that local authority and you cannot let friendship or ignorance get in the way of good governance.
Why do we have a culture of entitlement re-emerging again and again in these investigations? Is it, as you have suggested before, I can have these things and no one's going to scrutinise me?
I think that's a lot of it.
I work hard.
I think that's a lot of it. I mean, you look at, it was Ian Fletcher, and if I might say, I think Ian Fletcher's done a fantastic job with Keith Woodward, the acting CEO, Sue O'Toole, the Corporate Affairs Director at Exmouth. I think they've done a fantastic job to get Exmouth somewhere back to where it should be. I understand 5 managers, senior officers have left under Ian Fletcher. But the problem is, especially after people have been there for a while, I think they forget that it's ratepayers' money. It's not earned money. It's not come from Endeavour. It's ratepayers' money. And we all pay rates. We all pay pretty high rates. We'd like to think that it's spent on things that are actually worth spending on and that it's managed prudently.
What about a process, though, where I spend or I award $1 million contract for something, and if I had paid any attention to my role or my authority or my position, I would know that I have no authority to do that, that I can't just say, John, I'm going to give you the $1 million contract.
Well, and that is the problem in Exmouth. There are Exmouth policy rules, there are local government regulations that say you cannot let a contract above $150,000 without going to open tender, and in Exmouth the CEO could not let a contract above $150,000. But it's important to note that it's not the letting of the contract, unauthorised and wrong though that was, that caused the CCC to form an opinion of serious misconduct. It was preparing a document full of falsehoods to council, pretending that the contract was to be let when they'd already spent $206,000 already before it even went to council. Council were never told of any of that.
This morning we'll speak to Lynn Craigie, who's the president of the WA Local Government Association, also the president of a regional council, that's the Shire of East Pilbara. And we may hear, and I don't wish to get ahead of myself here, but we may hear the there's always one bad egg, etc., etc. But we are talking about people who are assuming authority and responsibility for significant spending and contract management. Is it a reality too that some of these people simply don't have the qualifications or the experience to do it and no one is watching?
I think that sums it up. Look, they are, I'm not suggesting that they're not good people and that they're not pillars and stalwarts of the community. But take Dowran. The Deputy President told us in open hearing, that until the Friday before, he didn't even know there was a Local Government Act. Now, that's just breathtaking. How can you possibly govern if you don't even know the basic structure under which you're appointed and govern?
In a minute, I'm going to ask you, and I'm just flagging it because I sense you will say this is a responsibility for the state government, but we have to talk about what needs to change here, and the Premier will be my guest after 9 o'clock, and I'll put that to him too. But the other challenge here, and this is what you've spoken about on this program before, and that is for other people to call out bad behaviour, for other people to blow the whistle. And again, in these environments, it's hard enough anyway, but it's hard enough in a small community when I see that you are doing this wrong and I know it's wrong and I say nothing.
It's even harder when it's your boss and you can be fired at will or without much cause because the boss himself is not controlled or herself is not controlled. You know, of course, Geoff, my favourite politician quote from Burke, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." I should say that was Edmund Burke.
Thank you. I was going to qualify. It wasn't Brian Burke with respect to him. It was, in fact, Edmund Burke. 1300 222 720. My guest this morning is John McKechnie, the CCC Commissioner. What I'd also like to hear from you this morning, folks, or whether you would be prepared to just contact us via email, if there is something that you need to tell us or would like to tell us or think this might prove an outlet to do so, send that email to perthmornings@abc.net.au. So, Mr McKechnie, what needs to happen now so you don't come back in a year telling us about a second and a third investigation into another council where these things are just being repeated, ratepayers are being ripped off?
Well, we have several investigations ongoing at the moment, and we've got plenty of other things to do, so I'd like not to be back. And what I think needs to happen is a mature discussion, freed from political considerations, but a mature discussion as to what role councils play and what should their responsibilities be in the 21st century in Western Australia. Are they holding us up, or are they working to the best advantage of the community?
Again, this is a political question, but I guess, is there a question to be raised about the amalgamations of council? Is the talent spread very, very thinly?
Well, Geoff, I'm brave.
I can sense your answer already.
I'm brave, but I'm not that brave. I'll leave that for others.
Okay. Look, last question, Mr McKechnie. Have you had any villains ringing you up, wanting to throw themselves on the mercy of the CCC now that you're going after their unexplained wealth? Have they rung up and said, yes, my wife did get this feather boa. Yes, I am driving around in this car?
If only it were that easy. But I will say that after the attorney described the CCC as the gates of hell, I now have on my door that quote from Dante, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." I hope that will apply to the Mr Bigs and Mr Big Enoughs.
How will you measure success? How should we measure success? What's a reasonable expectation?
Don't underestimate the difficulty of the task, but I would like to think in a couple of years we would have had a number of people that we've taken before the Supreme Court for consideration. It's relatively easy after all. Most of us have legitimate source of income, could explain where all our money and our wealth comes from. If you can't and it's coming from something illegal, you've got problems.
And it starts with an invitation to come in and have a talk?
Please do.
John McKechnie, for now, thank you very much indeed. Here's the Commissioner for the CCC. It may have been a light note to finish on, but genuine concerns about the way in which local government runs its business. And you heard the Commissioner talk about the number of investigations into regional councils, the behaviours of individuals in the council, the trends in those councils about decisions that get made, the expertise of those making those decisions and their motivations for doing so.